Welcome to Chaile Time, our weekly podcast where we learn about the do's and don'ts at the workplace. Toby, we are starting a podcast where we're going to find out about the mischief of employers and employees, how the employers are treating their staff, and how the employees can play dirty to their employers. Are you ready? Are we doing this?
Tsepo? We're going to tell it all. You know, we as people now, we always want to know what's going on in another person's house, isn't it? Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I think in my journey as an HR, or operating in the HR field, I always, also when I was working in corporate, I always wanted to know, how's another company doing this? How are those bosses treating the staff? And, you know, how's it going there? So I think it is very important. We're going to tell it all. We're going to tell exactly what we find in the field, what we experience, how employers are treating their employees, what they're doing, what they're not doing. Like this morning, for instance, an employer phoning, it's actually not a client of ours, it's a new employer out of the blue who dismissed staff by chasing them away for the suspicion of theft, you see. And so there's some bad news because, you know, obviously the dismissal is procedure and substantively unfair. So we're going to tell it all, but look, we're not going to name and shame. That's not the point. So we're not going to shame companies and individuals. But I think what's important is that we want to learn. As part of our objectives operating in the labor relations space, we want to teach people what not to do in the workplace. And maybe what to do, what are good practices, you know? How should you treat staff? What makes sense? You know, what are collective wisdom? And what are the loopholes or potholes we should try to let's make it real.
Welcome to South Africa.
Yeah, let's make it more closer, you see. What are the potholes we should avoid so that we don't have load shedding in the workplace, you see, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I'm very excited. Finally, we wanted to do this for a long time now. We're finally there. It's our podcast. I really hope that the viewers will enjoy this. If you're a human resource specialist or a business owner, I think, you know, you will hear the subtleties of what the legal requirements are in the workplace. You will learn about dispute resolution. You will hear our experiences, what we find in organizations and how they deal with people, and just basically what companies should or shouldn't do. At the end of the day, every employer, if you ask them, do you want to be successful? They all say yes. And not the only, but one of the major elements to success in the workplace really is the relationship between an employer and employee. Because get this now, when either an employee or an employer come to us for advice or because there's a dispute or a CCMA case, something firstly went wrong in the relationship. You see, and this relationship, and people, especially employers, don't always understand this. It is the quality of this relationship that to a large extent influences success, business success. But also for an employee, if you're an employee, it is the quality of this relationship that also impacts your success in your career ultimately. And if you ask employers what are their number one frustration in the workplace, employment relationships. It's employees, the frustration dealing with staff. And often it is because employers themselves are the cause of their own problems because they do not know how to deal with staff. They don't understand the concept of the wisdom or the benefits of creating a good, positive corporate culture. And there's this thing about capital, which are the employers, and labor on the side, which is the employees. Like we're against each other, you see, we all are grappling with our own interests, you know, and we don't understand we are actually supposed to be interdependent. But yeah, that's why we're doing this, and I'm really looking forward to this. I think we're going to have a great time. As you can see, we're in the construction business today.
Okay, as thorny as the labor relation can be, and it changes in time, you know, labor laws changes and it's very thorny. But remember, the main objective of the legislation, sometimes it's economic development. What's your take on that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's quite important. What people don't understand, employers especially don't understand, is that the objective of labor legislation, or one of the objectives, are to create labor peace in the workplace. And a lot of employers don't understand this. We get so emotionally involved in it's us against staff and staff against employers that, we forget that there are labor laws in place. There are policies or procedures and process in place in terms of dispute resolution mechanisms that you'll find in the Code of Good Practice of the Labor Relations Act. And these processes now is actually designed not to infringe or to take away from the employer or inhibit the ability of the employer to operate and be successful, but it's actually to the contrary, just to create a mechanism of fairness in the workplace. Because the reality of the matter is, every person, every human, whether you in the context of marriage or a relationship, employment, business, or whatever it may be, we all have our own sense of fairness. And as humans, we have the ability to get even with each other. And this is where the LRA is coming in. From a dispute resolution process perspective, it's really to create fairness in the workplace. At the end of the day, none of us enjoys being treated unfairly. And the LRA really try to establish that. And you'll be surprised, once you start following the processes and actually subject yourself to it, people, you create a sense of a bit more fairness in the workplace. And you know what? It works. It's a better alternative than just be arbitrary and malicious and just fire on the spot and give warnings on the spot without listening to staff. And you also don't have to always give a warning, even though that mechanism is in there. Often coaching is a better way of dealing with, let's say, poor performance in the workplace or even misconduct in the workplace. So, the purpose of the Labor Relations Act is to create labor peace, but also, sustainability in the workplace and to help with job and business security in the company.
So you also believe in rehabilitation. If someone commits a misconduct, it doesn't necessarily mean they must be fired. There should be rehabilitation.
Sure, Chaile. Look, there's a time for love and there's a time for war. There's a time and a place to dismiss.
Yes.
Sometimes an employee should not be in the workplace. But this is my personal view. And this is actually so strange because I help so many companies with warnings, and you also. Every day you're doing warnings.
Yes.
Every day you're doing hearings. So often we're in a CCM in arbitration or at the bargaining councils in arbitration. So it is very confrontational what we do. But yet personally, and I hope that the way I run our business, I believe more in coaching. Because the fact of the matter is, if we're not there when we need to fire somebody, then what does warnings really achieve? Yeah. Warnings is actually a way for an employer to say, I'm angry at you. And it's for an employee to feel punished. I mean, we're not school children, are we? So what I prefer doing is coaching. I mean, I can more see if somebody's got a bad attitude. If you've got a bad attitude, then you mustn't be here. But if you're trying your best and you make mistakes, rehabilitation, coaching, letting the staff see the bigger picture. As an example, what I sometimes tell when I consult companies and staff, sometimes, as an example, the accountant will forget to send invoices. And when the boss asks, why didn't you send the invoice? Then it's I forgot. So instead of giving a warning, because the person is not a bad person, the person is actually trying his or her best, sit with the person and say, how will you feel if payday, I forgot. I forgot to press that pay button. Let the person experience the emotion,
Yeah.
I've got debit orders going off, Sure. Then you tell the person, but I also don't feel good, if you don't send the invoices. Because the reality is no company's got money to pay, It's the customers that got the money to pay.
Yeah.
And when staff, yeah, it is just so funny, this conversation, because what staff don't always understand is they think it's the company's got all this money they pay, but they forget that it's the customer that's paying you. If you don't send the invoice, where are they going to get money from to pay you, you see? So that's how coaching can sometimes help, yeah.
Okay, I believe recently you had quite an experience. Actually, this is fascinating, where one of the companies that it's one of your clients. Now, you had the EFF come knocking on their door, and then they were bombarding it, the company. What really happened? I really need a clarity and a full story on that.
This is a company in Johannesburg. It's a construction company. They're in the construction business. Yes, that's why we have our caps on today. Construction business. It was absolutely chaos, Tsepo. EFF came knocking on the door and they've got a whole list of grievances, and even though it seemed like there was a core problem. So the company phoned me and asked me to go and sort out the EFF. Now, that's interesting because I can't sort out the EFF. I mean, what must I do? I mean, the EFF is a political party. I mean, there's nothing I can do with the EFF. But anyway, I can engage, and I know labor legislation. So I did have a meeting with the EFF representatives in this area, and I explained to them, listen, the Labor Relations Act do not recognize the EFF as a collective bargaining unit in the workplace. It's not provided for in terms of the Labor Relations Act. They're not a trade union, for instance, that has organizational rights in the workplace, for instance. And I explained to them, like, listen, we don't actually engage with political parties. So we don't, whether you're the EFF, ANC, DA, Freedom Front Plus, or whoever it may be, Action South Africa, we don't entertain conversations with them in context of the workspace, okay? So, and contrary to the view out there, the EFF was actually very respectable. They withdrew. I've actually never heard from the EFF again. But you know what, Tsepo? The very next day, everybody belonged to a union.
Red flag, innit?
I'm telling you, the very next day, every employee in that company was a member of a trade union. I'm not going to say the name because we received a organizational rights application the very next day. But now, my question, as you say, red flag, yes. Why will an employee be compelled to talk to the EFF? Why? Aren't you supposed to be talking to your employer?
Yes, definitely.
Okay? Because, and this is the thing, when we represent employers at the CCMA, and the commissioner asks the same thing, sir or madam, now the employee, aren't you supposed to be talking to your employer? Then the employer always sits and says, yeah, you're supposed to be talking to us. They don't talk to us. But you know what? When the employees do talk to them, there's something wrong with the ears. You see, you can't hear. They but then they get fancy people like us, to go to the CCMA and argue, but you're supposed to submit the grievance, you're supposed to be talking to us. But then, there's nothing happening there, you see. So anyway, from an organizational culture perspective, if staff feel they need to go speak to a political party, there's something wrong in the underlying relationship here. There's something wrong in organizational culture. Somewhere we're missing this. We're doing something wrong. So you can't, it shouldn't be that way. But anyway, so the staff was completely in uproar, and it was amazing. Since that day, every single warning that the company will give to the staff is referred to the CCMA as unfair labor practice. Every dismissal referred to the CCMA as an unfair dismissal dispute. They are lining up. So on the one hand, we are dealing with all these CCMA cases, and I must say we are like 99% through all of it, and there wasn't one comeback yet for the company. So we had good results for every single one of them. They also applied at the CCMA to consult or negotiate on matters of mutual interests. The company didn't come to the party. They applied to the CCMA for conciliation. Actually, we didn't pitch on this occasion because the employer just feel that we don't have a relationship with the union. There's no organizational rights. You know what? We're not going to do this. Look, there was a bit of practical wisdom here too, which I'm not going to talk about over here. So they organized a strike, but you see, the thing is, this location is beautiful. You could really strike there. That's part of the reason why we didn't pitch. We say, okay, if you want to strike, we would like to see this. We're going to have our popcorn and see how this strike goes. Anyway.
Employer.
You say as a labor relations specialist, it's not only about the law. Sometimes we'll use this little thing here. Dispute resolution is like a ball, it's a game, like a tennis ball. You just throw at each other and say, okay, the law is here one side, but you just throw it at each other, you see. And in this case, we knew the only thing they can do if conciliation fails to go on a strike. But we knew the circumstances. It's going to be nice to see how this worked. Anyway, they did go on a strike. It lasted one morning and then the strike was gone. But anyway, so the strike was gone. But we can laugh about it now. But the fact of the matter is, this is not good for the business.
Yeah.
It's just not. So I asked myself at the end of the day, what is really going on here? I also invited the staff, if they have grievances, they must come talk to me and whatever, you know. And actually, everything came down to one thing.
I was about to ask you actually, what really led to, you know, in a series of episodes, what really led to this one thing of now staff inviting EFF and then now wanting to go on strike and end up going on strike whereby you were eating your popcorn watching them, but well, that's a story for another day. What really led to that?
Yeah, you see, Tepona, when people like us, you know, we know the labor laws and we try to fight those battles for companies, and we're quite successful at that. But what we often forget is that if we drink a glass of champagne at the end of the day, we've won this battle, we probably lost the war. Because at the end of the day, this human relationship, you can't really govern it by laws, man. You know, there's a sense of, you know, we have a civil contract with each other. We're supposed to be interdependent. You know, people get even. And yes, we won CCMA cases, but the employer is at fault because this whole thing came down to one thing. The employer is deducting PAYE from the staff's salaries, which is fine, which is right. Now, for those of you who may not necessarily know, PAYE is employee tax. Every employer must deduct the required tax from an employee's payslip every month.
Pay as you earn.
That's right, pay as you earn, yeah.
I'm correct. Yeah.
That's how you pronounce it. But the problem is, the employer don't pay it over to SARS, meaning there's no IRP 5s. And the staff have been asking for these IRP 5s for a long time because SARS is on their case now. And every time they ask the employer for the IRP 5s, yeah, first year and then us year. Because now, you know, they will not expose the corrupt dealings of what the employer is up to, you see. It's like a chess game. Now, the employer is, he's not in checkmate yet, he's in check. Now I get us. You see, help me not to get the checkmate. You see, that's the issue. Now you get the EFF and the unions and all these people involved. But okay, look, I must give it to the employer too. They are going through a process of rehabilitation with SARS. You know, SARS did get involved, and I believe they have been paying penalties. And they, as far as I'm aware, the books are not 100% in order yet, but I think they are almost there. They're getting there. So they are trying to do the right thing now. But this doesn't take away from the years of irregular conduct from the employer. So in this case, you know, the employers are trying to make money. But the way they conduct their affairs, you know, they're actually breaking this trust relationship, you know. We always say at the dismissal dispute, the trust is broken, the employee is breaking the trust. But what we often don't forget, or we do forget, is that fiduciary duty, that act of good faith between an employer and employee, it cut both ways. Yeah. You know, employers are quick to say, the employee is in breach of their fiduciary duty. But the employer is often in breach of their fiduciary duty towards the employee also. Yeah. It works both ways. And we're not mindful of this. And it's like a snowball effect. You think you're getting away with it today. And I'm telling you, often companies will phone us and say, listen, there's chaos. But the chaos did not start yesterday. It started 5 years ago. It's an accumulation of this snowball effect of not treating staff with integrity and dignity, not following the correct process in the LRA, not paying your tax. You know, suddenly creating this vacuum for all these other third parties to come and nest in your space, you see.
Yes. But now, times are tough, Toby. Times are tough. First, it was COVID that hit almost 2 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 2-3 years, yeah.
Yes. And then now we have load shedding.
No. We've always had that.
No, but now it's a pandemic now. We always had load shedding.
It's like COVID is viral.
As we speak, we are on stage 6 of load shedding, but we never had stage 6 before. But now, businesses are trying their best to sustain themselves, and then the economy is hitting bad. So how do we expect businesses to survive in all those conditions?
Yeah, look, it is tough. It really is, and I know a lot of companies are closed down, and as we speak, a lot of companies are trying to recover. Okay, so it's tough. Now, look, your question goes to business success. How do we become successful in this aspect? Look, there are various factors that determine and influence success in the workplace, But we are only focusing on one element, which is a very important element, and it's this relationship between the employer and the employee. The real question an employer must ask himself is, can they afford not to have a good, positive organizational culture? Can you actually afford not to have that? Can you actually afford to have a negative, toxic environment in the workplace where people actually fight against each other? Now, for those that know me, I love religion a bit, I learn from all walks of life. I learn from Hitler. I learn from apartheid. I learn from the modern era we're living in. I learn from politicians, Julius Malema, Nelson Mandela, but I also learn from religious books. And there's this piece of passage in the Bible now that says that, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So it doesn't make sense to have a negative, toxic environment, because actually what we're doing is we're not servicing our clients. We're actually fighting each other. But now we are supposed to be interdependent. And the question then is, what is the impact of a positive, interdependent culture where we engage one another? What's the impact of that on the books? Revenue. Is there an impact? Is there a nexus we can draw between the two? I want to tell an interesting story. A few years ago, it was somewhere around COVID. I think it was in the middle of COVID or so. I went to visit a company in the Kempton Park area. Yes, what an experience. I came in there and I had a meeting with management, with the CEO and some executives. The HR manager was also there, but when I came in there was a cleaner there. Everybody was just so friendly. Everybody greeted me. But interesting is, it wasn't the cleaner who made the coffee, it was the HR manager.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, you don't often see that. You're always like, please make coffee and point to the cleaner or whatever, but in this case, not. I really felt, hey, there's a bit of a servanthood attitude here, or spirit here, or whatever you see. Anyway, then they took me through a tour. These people are manufacturing, they are importing German components in a manufacturing space and so forth, and we went through a tour, we went through the store, and there were staff walking there, and as we walked, they greeted us nicely, but we came around the corner and there was this big mechanical workshop. Tsepo, my jaw fell open. It was cleaner than a hospital. Normally you will see oil marks and dirty mechanics, whatever. Spotless, the floor, I suppose the floor was like a prison, in prison they always polish the floors, you see, it was like that, it was like sparkling, the equipment, the spanners, everything was just sparkling. So I stood still there, and I just asked, so I was talking to them about what I'm seeing here, and they told me normally with their clients, when they want to close a deal, they also take them through a tour, and when they get to the mechanical workshop, that's when they start signing papers. That's when they get to close the deals. So I asked them, how does this impact revenue, now, especially in terms of COVID, because their competitors, some of them actually start closing down. And they told me it's booming. They can't keep up. It is just revenue, sales, it's just increasing, ever increasing. But anyway, we continued with the tour, and at some stage we got to a little bit of a library. And there they have it. A few computers with books, Wi-Fi, a nice big printer. The staff's children, after school, they come and sit there and they do homework there. Yeah, they do the homework because the company feel they want their employees, to know that the kids are taken care of, that the kids are secure and safe, and that they actually are doing their homework, these little buggers. So, you know, otherwise mommy's not watching them.
Yeah.
You know, then you're not doing your homework. Anyway, so, and there was a canteen with free food and so forth. But the best part is, they've actually explained to me, they have a legal budget for their staff. So in their private lives, if they get involved in legal disputes, and at that time, just recently at that time, one female employee went through a divorce, and the company actually paid for her legal fees. Don't start now. Okay, but this is now an exciting example of a company creating a fantastic organizational culture. And I know about other companies like this too. Now, I'm not saying we must go overboard like that. You know, not all companies have these budgets to pay for staff's legal fees. I get that. But the scientific evidence is there. A good culture leads to more money.
Yeah.
And it creates a bit more fairness in the workplace. And you know what? We have some clients like that. There's never a warning going out. There's never a CCMA case. Just never.
Yeah, because sometimes you ask and say,
And they're using us only to consult on how to do this and how to do that. They don't have disputes in the workplace. And it's because of that culture. So that's my experience with EFF and unions and people not paying their taxes, Tsepo.
Thank you very much for unpacking all of that for us. Folks, that's what we have for this week. And thanks for watching.
Thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you.